Thanks very much, Phil. Before I get into this, which is the Longevity Biotech Association, I'd like to, for all of us, to give thanks to some people who've made this day, and indeed the whole of the Longevity Week, which is a project of the Longevity Forum, possible. The first is Andrew Scott, who's here in the audience, Professor Andrew Scott. The second is, sorry, I thought my voice was booming enough. The second is Dafina Grapschi-Penny, who's the co-founder alongside Andrew and myself of the Longevity Forum. So in her absence, she will be turning up later. A clap for her as well, please. James Harper-Lewis of Master Investor has put all this day together and has done, I think, a brilliant job. Laura Walker of the Longevity Forum, who's come all the way from North Carolina, I think, or somewhere like that, to organize it for us, has done a brilliant job. And of course, the inestimable Trish Wilson, my sister, who is involved in just about everything. Stand up, Trish, take a bow. Who has kept this show on the road. I better get up to the lectern because I've got a few slides which Beyond Aging have put together and probably which I won't speak to, even though they're wonderful slides. A bunch of us, really a few months, maybe 6 months ago, started to talk about putting Longevity Biotech Association together, and I'll tell you the reason for it. That bunch includes 4 of us who are here today. Mehmood Khan, Nir Barzilai, and James Peyer, as well as myself, and the inestimable Trish Wilson, who's really kept the show on the road, at least in the beginning part of the of our project. And we decided to put this together because the industry has now got to the age and stage at which it's appropriate that the best elements of it should be represented in an association. So it was 5 years ago that I drove around the United States in a Honda CR-V. I went to every part of the US, and I interviewed the key opinion leaders, the so-called KOLs, in this industry. The one person I didn't interview who's here at the moment is Professor Kirkland, because I didn't know him, but more or less everyone else I met consented, or most people consented to an interview, and I met them and they went into the book. And this demonstrated to me that this is a really collaborative industry. The internet has made collaboration across the airways possible across all national boundaries in almost every industry. But of all the industries I've studied in my long career, this is the one in which people are really friendly, really open to collaboration, really open to sharing ideas, and are all mission aligned, which is compression of morbidity, improving human health span, and ultimately, hopefully, adding some extra years of life. And I came, as we developed our business and other businesses were developed, to associate the industry with a kind of concept of family, because I think it is a kind of family, and almost everyone in this room today I know and consider to be part of the Longevity family. So I want to make, before I get into this launch, I want us all to give ourselves a collective clap, because we are a family of great importance, of great mission to improve human health span, to alleviate the misery that's associated with a large part of people's lives currently, and to do it quickly, effectively, and bring the products that are going to transform the world to the market as quickly as possible. So everyone clap each other. So we decided to set up the Longevity Biotech Association. Almost everything in the world to do with technology is either based in China or in the United States. But this is a genuine international enterprise. About half of the members so far are non-US members, and about half are US members. And I think that more or less reflects the efforts around the world in the science of longevity. When I did my book 5 years ago, or started to write my book 5 years ago, almost no money had come into the field. Today I heard from Phil that it was about $12 billion so far. So when I started, and everyone else started, the internet, if you can use it as an analogy, had hardly even started in the sort of the mid-1980s, the early 1990s. Today, the longevity biotech industry and the science is at the dial-up phase of the internet. None of us really know what's going to work, apart from metformin, of course, but we do know that some things are going to work. And so we're sort of groping a little bit in the dark still. But as I said, it's time for us to get the best players in the industry together. And that's why we are launching tonight at this forum, the Longevity Biotech Association. We are at the beginning of a revolution that's going to transform all of our lives and hopefully will transform the lives of many of our relatives and friends. Sooner rather than later, we're going to have some drugs and therapies and other stuff that will be in wide dispersal and will consummate the hopes of many of us in this room that we will be alive to both benefit from them and see humanity benefiting from them. But in order to make this an effective industry, we have to set some standards. And the standards are not just to make sure that charlatans and ne'er-do-wells and snake oil salespeople are misrepresenting our industry, but also to set some standards related to biological clocks, which you've heard a lot about today, which can demonstrate fairly effectively whether therapies are working, both for individuals and for institutions and for governments, as well as for biomarker standards. And this will be one of the main elements of the LBA as it goes forward and will be described in greater detail by subsequent speakers in this presentation. So we are standard driven. We hope to be able to establish standards for this industry, which is very necessary as it grows rapidly. We are not a political lobbying group, but we do seek to educate anyone who will listen on why this is so important, the impact as represented by Andrew and David Sinclair's piece in Nature recently that this could have on the burdens on healthcare systems and on economies. And we are gathering almost everyone that at least we can find in this industry of note, with companies and institutions, academic researchers, and so forth. This is just a small selection of the people who signed up. You will recognize some of them here, I'm sure, if not everyone. You've got David Sinclair, you've got Sergey Young. What a great name for an anti-aging investor. And you've got Brian Kennedy, Kristen Fortney, who'll be speaking shortly. So basically, we've gathered together almost everyone in this mission. And if there are people that we've missed out, please do contact us or talk to any one of us later on and come and join the gang. And this is a highly touched up photograph of myself that I keep on telling Trish to remove, but she insists. Laura Denning, as many of you will know, has one of the key funds in the industry, and Mehmood is here and he'll be speaking later on. James, of course, you've heard from already and you'll be hearing from him relatively soon as well. So this is going to be a formidable association and it starts here today. Educating the public, investors and philanthropists, we really need more money coming into this field, and it can come from any source, but philanthropy is really important. And we heard about TAME. You know, Near is doing this for no reward. There is no money in generic drugs. He needs people to put their hands in their pockets and make TAME, which is vital to this industry, possible as an example. We also have Sami Sagal here, or at least he was, or he's there, who has donated huge amounts of money to the field of longevity. And then we need to standardize the geroscience industry, which we are, most of us, involved in, and introduce best practices, such as you would find, for instance, in the engineering business represented by this august and beautiful institution that we're in today. We are all sorts of people. We're biotech founders, we're investors, scientists, medical professionals, regulatory leaders, and scientific funders. And if I've missed people out here, please talk to us and join in. It's not an expensive project, but it's a vital project. And I'm super grateful to have been part of the start of this, seeing the big picture, which we've heard all about today so well. And again, to reiterate the standards as being highly important to the development of our critical industry, which won't just be very big in the same way as, for instance, the internet industry is, but will be vitally important to all of us as human beings. So tonight we launch the Longevity Business Association, and I've got 3 speakers to follow me, starting with Kristen Fortney, who can't be here tonight, but has made a pre-recorded video, which we're just about to watch. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm Kristen Fortney, the co-founder and CEO of BioAge. We're a clinical stage biotechnology company advancing a portfolio of therapies to treat diseases of aging. So to develop true gerotherapeutics, we're going to have to advance existing clinical stage drugs that impact diseases as well as aging, but additionally discover many novel medicines designed from the ground up to prevent aging. It's a great time to be in the aging field. Aging science has advanced substantially just in the past 2 decades. And there are many different pathways that we can now go after and target in the clinic to improve health span and lifespan. There's real progress being made using both approaches, with both the first wave of therapies that are already clinical stage, as well as with earlier discovery. So what I think is really exciting and maybe not widely appreciated is that there are a lot of drugs already in clinical trials or beyond that target key aging pathways. And additionally, as I mentioned, there's a whole bunch that are earlier in the pipeline too. Now, while these drugs are first being evaluated for specific diseases, they might ultimately impact how long you live and how healthy you are when you're older. And we're only going to learn about that, their ultimate impact on longevity and health span in the longer term, years, if not decades, because we don't really know how to measure aging. I think one great example here would be a drug like a statin, which today is prescribed like an aging drug. If you're over 40, you have a couple of risk markers, your doctor will prescribe you a statin. But they were first approved decades ago for an orphan disease, hypercholesterolemia. And at this rate of progress is quite slow. So to really drive clinical innovation and accelerate the next wave of therapies, and there's going to be a lot of them, we need to develop new ways of measuring human aging. And that means we need to come together as a field, come together as companies to really develop these new metrics and systems to evaluate aging in the clinic and to evaluate whether we're really impacting aging with these therapies. And now I'll pass it off to James to tell you what the future of clinical trials can look like for new aging drugs.
So I should be able to jump forward here. All right, so we're doing this handoff thing. So I'll take over from Kristen and kind of touch on the next step here. So Kristen just touched on these 2 ideas, right? Existing clinical stage programs, like TAME, which we just heard about, but also a whole series of other ones that can be used to test whether it can impact aging, as well as new drugs. And so a big reason that we wanted to start this Longevity Biotech Association is because each of us, as an industry, are advancing these different programs forward, targeting disparate causes of aging, right? Disparate types of damage that build up as we get older and as we get sicker. And the value to the industry, as we were talking about earlier today, will come from wins that we rack up in specific diseases. Hey, we used our emerging knowledge of the biology of aging to build a compound that treats this disease. The next step, as we go to build a gerotherapeutic, which is a term that Nir has turned me onto and I think is going to be the term of art for this space, a gerotherapeutic, a drug that can slow down aging, it's going to have an additional set of challenges in front of it. And there's a group of us in running biotech companies, in academia, who really will need to work together in order to get over that hill. And if we can get over it, it's going to benefit everyone who not only is spending their lives and their energies to build these new medicines, but around the world and the impact it will have on patients. And in my view, the biggest challenge to developing these gerotherapeutics is around how do we do the clinical trials to make sure that they actually work. And so here's my super simplified diagram of what's going on in this longevity field today. And it's really this green box here that we're treating diseases reactively using all of these new insights based on the causes of aging. But the focus of the Longevity Biotech Association is to help support these two other aspects, right? Long-form prevention trials, some of which, like TAME, we heard about, that are already keyed up to be done, but there will be many more. And then eventually, as these come together, surrogate biomarker trials that will demonstrate the extension of health span. And in order to do that, we need to be able to go to regulators like the FDA and follow the regulatory path that Kristen was just alluding to around statins, where we say, hey, let's measure something in a person and say you're at risk for developing multiple different diseases of aging. So let us run a phase 2 and then maybe even a phase 3 trial in otherwise healthy people to show that we can impact their risk of a disease and then get a product on the market to patients before they get sick. Having individual trials from individual groups will take a lot of good steps towards making that happen, but to the extent that different folks in this world can work together and establish a shared standard and share best practices across this field, I think we can make this happen so much faster. Kristen just mentioned before that from the time that the first statin was approved to the use of high cholesterol as a clinical marker that could lead to an approval of a drug, it took decades. We need to do better as a field. And the way that we're going to do better is by working together, by sharing data, and by being aligned towards a mission that will help everyone in our field, right, that cares about the science of longevity, but also, again, everyone worldwide. And that's why I'm really, really pleased to have such an incredible group of people that have come together around this shared mission, where we can take a very scientific view of this question, where we can say, we don't know all the answers. We don't have the standard to present today, this is going to be it. But we can get some of the smartest people in the world together under one roof to say, here's how we're going to find out. And when we find out, we're going to move forward together. And I think that's something really worth celebrating. Which means I think it's the end of my couple of slides, and I can pass it off to my colleague, Mehmood Khan.
Well, good afternoon. My apologies. I had to step out for a couple of hours for another aging scientists meetings. We're literally aging. I'm going to talk a little bit about the need for philanthropy in this space, but not philanthropy as we might have known it traditionally, but perhaps thinking a little broadly. What's the problem we're trying to solve? Really, in my mind, and I'm relatively new to this field, I first started really thinking about it 2 years ago, having started my career as an endocrinologist. And despite my accent, actually, I'm a British-trained endocrinologist. The Minnesota part sort of took the British accent away. It's all Mayo Clinic's fault, Jim. As I think about this, 4 issues. Number one, this field is way underrepresented in the number of scientists working in the field. It's a talent gap. Now, this might sound crazy, but when I came out of medical school in 1981, geriatrics was not at the top of my list of specialties to go into. Frankly, nor was oncology. Cancer specialties back in the early 80s was part of a sought after as a residency in a fellowship. Was not the case 30-some years ago. In the same way, there's very good reason to believe that geroscience is right at that inflection point. But what can we do to attract this young talent? New talent, and what I think about is talent from adjacent fields. Fields that have the tools and solutions to help solve these problems, but were not being applied today. We saw that with a number of other diseases, HIV, infectious disease, all of these attracted new talent. So that's one role. Government needs to play a role in that, but so does philanthropy. And if you think about cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, a number of diseases, philanthropy played a very important catalytic role as a catalyst in convening, bringing focus. The second gap is we're at this transition from having spent the last 30 years understanding and increasingly understanding the biology of the aging process and translating that from process and biology systems to therapeutic targets. Every field that you can think about has transitioned from we now understand the biology to how to make it into a therapeutic target. Geoscience is right at that transition. And yes, there have been pioneers, and there's 2 or 3 in this room who've been advocating for this, but it hasn't been loud enough and broad enough. Now is that inflection point. The third gap is a gap on the private sector side. We have heard a significant increase in funding, but you know what? $50 million, $100 million, $200 million backing a company is nothing compared to the sort of funding that's going after AI, that's going after automation, that's going after robotics, going after cancer targets. Compare that of what's coming, and what we're getting in this field is tiny. That transition will happen when awareness increases, but there's a few wins. To date, we don't have a single win. That win is going to happen when somebody's willing to take enough risk in that diversified approach. And that risk can only be taken by patient capital. If you use a traditional VC model, then a 10-year life of a fund, 5-year returns, we've all heard it, the 20% carry, the 2%, cannot happen in the early stages. It didn't happen in any of those other diseases, and it's going to have to be patient capital at scale. So individual philanthropy is important. 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 30 million donations go a long way in a nascent field, but you want to go to the next step of scaling it up, you're going to have to add a few zeros. And that requires scale philanthropy, which can only happen at national or institutional level. The fourth gap is a champion. Every field that successfully transitioned at scale has had an advocate and a champion. And it's had multiple together, can advocate, create awareness, create the influence that suddenly gets the attraction. So why is it the right time for this field? Well, everybody in this room realizes, as we've heard over and over again, in the UK, 50% of the children born in 2000 are going to live to be at least 90. I just came from a meeting with 2 of the senior-most NHS leaders in this country, and there's no way the NHS or the US Medicare or any other system can afford to pay for this. Having said that, by the way, the developing world, where birth rates are falling dramatically, in the Middle East, they've fallen by 75% in the last decade. 75% decline in birth rate. That is just a matter of time when that young cohort of young workers will now become the middle-aged workers and the old, and there's no children to replace them because their societies are also transitioning. And so it's an acute problem for the developed world. It's an imminent to-be problem for the developing world. And this is one of those things, unlike global warming, that just about every country I ever speak to, and I travel the world, where everybody recognizes this is a problem that we all collectively have to solve and come together on. Whether you're on the Chinese camp or the US camp, it's common to both. This is not coal versus oil versus alternative fuels. That's where philanthropy can come in, and scale philanthropy, because philanthropy has the ability to convene, stay neutral, no strings attached, advocate for the problem rather than a single company, a single country, a single worker, or a single investigator. The goal is solving the problem, not solving for an institution. And one of the things as CEO of, as we're about to launch our organization, is to stay in that convening role first and foremost, and advocate for the solution, not for an institution, or a nation, or a region, or a certain people. It has to be for the benefit of all. The second thing, and I'm very strong about this with my own team now as our team grows. It has to be for the benefit of all, which means whatever technologies we come up with have to be scalable and therefore democratized. If you solve for a small number of people with a very expensive treatment, that's right for a rare disease because there are only very few people. But if you're solving for something that's going to need 7 billion people as the target, it cannot cost $100,000 a shot. That is paramount to saying there is no solution. And so it has to be democratized. And the last piece on this is, and this is be music to my friend Neer's ears, and Neer and I, by the way, have been talking about some of these problems for a decade and a half at least. Only I didn't call myself an aging researcher, even though I was aging. You still educate me. I'm Jim and Neer's student. This is official. The question in my mind is, I don't think of any organization that's going to fund the repurposing of drugs in research other than a nonprofit. Corporate America or corporate UK or corporate Europe is not going to fund the repurposing of a trial for aging. Just isn't part of the mandate. And I, in my former life, was president of Global R&D Center for Takeda and head of R&D for PepsiCo. So I've run R&D for 2 Fortune 100 companies. Ain't going to happen. It's not going to be the mandate of a government. There's no regulatory agency says we'll go and fund the repurposing of a trial because the drug's already on the market. They're going to say, well, it's there. It has to be a nonprofit, and it's going to take the sort of resources of a scale nonprofit, ideally pooling. My last comment as I leave you with this thought is, a successful nonprofit in this field will make itself obsolete. And the goal should not be to be the largest. It should not be to remain the biggest. It should actually be to become obsolete because the funding and the talent pool and the workers on this field have become so much scaled that you essentially become forgotten. And it is, by definition, just like a catalyst. It becomes part of the process, but eventually is not necessary. And that should be the goal, and that is very much our goal, to democratize what we fund, and then eventually see it scale such that we're no longer the player. Thank you very much.
So, I think that's the, we have a couple more. Trisha's piloting me forward. All right. So this is the announcement that we wanted to tack on at the end of the day today. Mehmood, Jim, and Kristen in absentia, thanks so much. And thanks everyone who helped come together to launch this. If any of you guys want to learn more, we have a website up now. There is this email address that you can reach us. This is really, I think, the beginning of an interesting time as we try to serve to convene all of these different folks together under the same umbrella to talk about this, working with different nonprofits, with academics, with companies in the space. I think we're all going to go grab a glass of Prosecco if it's around at the reception after this, but really appreciate you guys giving us your attention, and very excited to be launching the Longevity Biotech Association with a great group of friends here. So cheers.